Have you ever watched your whole world fall apart right before your eyes? I mean, really crumble. Bank accounts frozen, friends gone, standing alone in a courtroom with nothing but the clothes on your back. That's where Joy found herself. Her husband, Victor, thought he had already won. He thought cutting her off from everything would make her disappear quietly. He even stood up in court and told the judge she was too foolish to hire a lawyer. She lacks the credibility and integrity to stand against someone of my stature, he sneered. But Victor made one critical mistake. He forgot to ask Joy about her mother. And when those courtroom doors flew open, the look on Victor's face, oh no. Let me tell you, it wasn't just shock. It was pure terror. You're about to hear the most savage courtroom destruction in Nigerian history. Hello, welcome to African Moonlight Tales. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with your friends, and most important thing, turn your notification bell so you can get informed when I dropped another amazing story. Drop your thoughts and reactions in the comments. What would you do if your spouse tried to kill you and you survive? Will you take a revenge or disappear forever? The air inside courtroom 12 of the Port Harcourt High Court was thick and heavy. The ceiling fan spun slowly overhead, barely moving the humid air that smelled faintly of old wood and floor polish. It was the smell of endings, of marriages dissolving, of lives being split apart on paper. But for Victor Okafor, the air smelled like victory. Victor sat in his chair at the plaintiff's table, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive imported suit. The fabric was smooth, probably cost more than most people in Port Harcourt made in 3 months. He checked his wristwatch, a gold Rolex that caught the light streaming through the high windows, and let out a sharp breath through his nose. Impatient, confident. She's late, Victor whispered to the man sitting beside him. Or maybe she's finally realized there's no point in showing up. The man next to Victor was Amici Nosu. If you knew anything about divorce law in Rivers State, you knew that name. Amici wasn't just a lawyer, he was a destroyer. Senior partner at Nosu, Peters and Associates, he had built his reputation by crushing opposition in divorce cases. People called him the Hammer because once he started hitting, he didn't stop until everything was broken. Amici straightened his burgundy tie, his eyes scanning the court documents in front of him with the look of a man who had already won. It doesn't matter if she shows up, Victor, Amici said quietly, his voice smooth like oil. We filed the emergency order to freeze all the joint accounts on Monday. She has no access to cash. No money means no lawyer. And no lawyer facing me means she walks out of here with whatever crumbs we decide to give her. Victor smiled, turning to look across the aisle. Sitting there, completely alone, was Joy. She looked so small, smaller than Victor remembered. She wore a simple gray dress, the kind you could buy at Balagan Market for a few thousand naira. Nothing fancy. Her hands were folded on the wooden table in front of her, fingers locked together, so tight her knuckles had turned pale. There were no files in front of her, no legal assistants whispering advice, no glass of water. Just Joy, staring straight ahead at the empty judge's chair, her face expressionless. Look at her, Victor said, loud enough that the handful of people sitting in the public gallery could hear. His voice carried across the quiet courtroom. Pathetic. I almost feel sorry for her. It's like watching a goat tied up at the abattoir. She knows what's coming, but there's nothing she can do about it. Focus, Victor, Amici warned, though a slight smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Justice Okoro doesn't like noise in his courtroom. Let's finish this quickly. I have a meeting with the governor's legal team at 2 o'clock. Don't worry, Amici, Victor said, leaning back in his chair. By 2 o'clock, I'll be a free man, and she'll be packing her things into one of those yellow Danfo buses, heading back to wherever she came from. The courtroom door opened, and a heavy-set man in a black uniform walked in. Officer Chuckwill. He had been a bailiff in Port Harcourt courts for 15 years, and had seen enough divorces to make him stop believing in love altogether. His voice boomed across the room. All rise. The Honorable Justice Benjamin Okoro presiding. Everyone stood up. The rustle of clothing and shuffling of feet echoed in the high-ceilinged room. Justice Okoro walked in, his black robe flowing behind him. He was a thin man with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. He had a reputation for running his courtroom with military precision. No delays, no excuses, no nonsense. He took his seat at the elevated bench, adjusted his reading glasses, and looked down at the papers in front of him. "Be seated," Justice Okoro said. His voice wasn't loud, but it commanded instant obedience. Everyone sat. He opened the file. Case number HC/PH/2022/1847. Okafor versus Okafor. This is a preliminary hearing for the dissolution of marriage and the matter of asset division and spousal maintenance. Justice Okoro looked up at the plaintiff's table. "Barrister Nosu, good to see you." "Thank you, my lord," Amici said, standing smoothly. "We are ready to proceed." Justice Okoro turned his gaze to the defense table. His eyes narrowed slightly. Joy stood up slowly, her legs shaking just a little. "Mrs. Okafor," Justice Okoro said, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "I see you are here without counsel. Are you expecting representation?" Joy cleared her throat. Her voice was soft, almost swallowed by the size of the courtroom. "Yes, my lord. She should be here very soon." Victor let out a loud snort. He didn't even bother to cover his mouth. The sound cut through the silence like a knife. Justice Okoro's head snapped toward Victor. "Is something funny, Mr. Okafor?" Amici immediately stood up, placing a firm hand on Victor's shoulder. "Apologies, my lord. My client is simply frustrated. This matter has dragged on for months, and the emotional strain is considerable. Control your client, Barrister Nosu," Justice Okoro warned, his tone cold. "This is a court of law, not a beer parlor." He turned back to Joy. "Mrs. Okafor, this hearing was scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock. It is now 5 minutes past. The court's time is valuable. If your attorney is not present within the next few minutes, I will have to assume you are proceeding without representation." "She is coming, my lord," Joy said, her voice gaining just a tiny bit of strength. "There was traffic on ABA Road." "Traffic," Victor muttered, leaning forward so his voice would carry. "Or maybe your lawyer realized you can't pay her." "Oh, wait, you can't pay anyone. I froze the accounts this morning. Remember?" Bang! Justice Okoro slammed his gavel on the wooden block. The sharp crack echoed like a gunshot. "One more word from you, and you will spend the rest of this hearing in a holding cell. Do you understand me?" "Yes, my lord," Victor said, standing up quickly and buttoning his jacket. He put on a look of fake humility, but his eyes were still mocking. "I apologize. I simply want what's fair. My wife is confused. She doesn't understand how the law works. She has no income, no skills, nothing. I offered her a generous settlement last week, 2 million naira and the 2015 Toyota Camry. She refused." Victor turned and looked directly at Joy. His eyes were cold. "Dead. I tried to help you, Joy. I really did. But you wanted to play games. Now look where you are, sitting there with nobody. You don't have a lawyer because no lawyer wants to work for free." "Barrister Nosu," Justice Okoro said sharply. "Control your client, or I will hold him in contempt." "My lord," Amici said smoothly, standing and buttoning his own jacket. "While my client's passion is regrettable, his point has merit. We are wasting the court's valuable time. Mrs. Okafor has clearly not secured representation. Under the rules of this court and established precedent, we respectfully move to proceed immediately with a judgment based on the evidence already filed. She has had months to prepare." Justice Okoro looked at Joy. He looked tired, like he had heard this same story 100 times before. "Mrs. Okafor," he said slowly, "Barrister Nosu is correct on a technical point. The court cannot wait indefinitely. If you cannot produce legal counsel right now, I must assume you're representing yourself. And I must tell you, given the complex financial matters involved in this case, that would be extremely unwise. Do you understand?" "I am not representing myself, my lord," Joy said. Her eyes were still fixed on the heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom. "Please, just 2 more minutes." "She's coming. She's lying," Victor hissed. "She has nobody. Her father was a mechanic who died years ago. Her mother abandoned her. She has no family, no connections. Who is she going to call? A miracle worker?" Victor laughed again. It was a cruel sound, harsh and grating. He felt powerful. He had spent months planning this. He had frozen her bank accounts. He had spread rumors about her to their friends. He had made sure she would be isolated, alone, and helpless. He wanted her to suffer. He wanted her to know that defying him was the biggest mistake of her life. My lord, Amici pressed, sensing the opportunity. I moved to strike her request for a delay. Let's end this matter now. Justice Okoro sighed deeply. He reached for his gavel. Mrs. Okafor, I am sorry. We cannot continue to delay proceedings. We will have to proceed with. Slam. The doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They were thrown open with such force that they slammed against the walls. The sound was like thunder, like an explosion. Every head in the courtroom turned. Victor spun around in his chair, annoyed at the interruption. Amici Nosu looked up from his papers, his pen frozen in midair. The courtroom went completely silent. Even the ceiling fans seemed to stop spinning. Standing in the doorway was not some local lawyer in a worn-out wig and gown. Standing there was a woman who looked to be in her late 60s, but she stood as straight as a flagpole. She wore a brilliant white suit that looked like it cost more than Victor's car. Her silver hair was cut into a sharp, precise style that screamed money and power. She wore dark designer sunglasses, which she slowly removed, revealing eyes that were cold and sharp as broken glass. Behind her walked 3 younger lawyers, all carrying expensive leather briefcases, moving in perfect formation, like soldiers following a general into battle. The woman didn't hurry. She walked down the center aisle, her heels clicking on the tiled floor. Each step sounded like a countdown, like time running out. Amici Nosu dropped his pen. His mouth fell open slightly. His face, usually so confident and arrogant, turned pale. Actually pale. No, Amici whispered, genuine fear creeping into his voice. That's not possible. Who is that? Victor asked, confused by his lawyer's reaction. Is that her mother? Joy's mother died when she was young. She told me she was an orphan. The woman reached the defense table. She didn't look at Joy. She didn't look at Justice Okoro. She turned slowly and looked directly at Victor Okafor. She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile a python gives before it squeezes. Apologies for my late arrival, my lord, the woman said. Her voice was smooth, cultured, and filled every corner of the room without her even raising it. I was delayed filing several motions at the Federal High Court in Abuja regarding Mr. Okafor's financial statements. It took longer than expected to document all his hidden accounts in Dubai and the Cayman Islands. Victor's blood ran cold. Justice Okoro leaned forward, his eyes wide. Counsel, state your name for the record. The woman placed a gold-embossed business card on the court reporter's desk. She turned to face the judge. Helen Adekunle, she said clearly. Senior Managing Partner at Adekunle, Williams & Partners, with offices in Abuja, Lagos, and London. I am entering my appearance as counsel for the defendant, Mrs. Joy Okafor. She paused, letting the weight of her name sink in. Then she looked at Victor again, and she added, her voice dropping lower, I am also her mother. The silence that followed was absolute. Total. It was the kind of silence that falls after a bomb goes off. Victor Okafor's brain struggled to process what he had just heard. Mother, he stammered, looking from the imposing woman in white to his trembling wife. Joy, you said your mother. You said she left you. You said she was gone. Joy finally looked up. Her eyes were wet with tears, but her chin was raised high. I said she was gone from my life, Victor. I didn't say she was dead. We were estranged until yesterday. Estranged, Helen Adekunle repeated, letting the word hang in the air like a death sentence. She moved around the defense table, taking the chair beside her daughter. She didn't hug Joy. Not yet. This was business. She placed a heavy briefcase on the table and opened it with 2 sharp clicks. Joy left home 25 years ago because she wanted to escape my world, Helen explained, her voice calm but filled with power. She wanted a simple life. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not because her mother built the law firm that handles cases for half the oil companies in Nigeria. Helen turned her razor-sharp gaze to Amici Nosu. The opposing lawyer looked like he wished the floor would open up and swallow him. "Hello, Amici," Helen said pleasantly. "I haven't seen you since the petroleum ministry contract dispute in 2018. You were barely a junior associate then, weren't you? Carrying files for the real lawyers." Amici Nosu cleared his throat. His face flushed a deep red. "Mrs. Adekunle, it is an honor. I was not aware you were admitted to practice in Rivers State." "I'm admitted to the bar in Rivers State, Lagos State, Abuja, and I have appeared before the West African Court of Justice," she replied, not breaking eye contact. "I normally handle constitutional matters and international corporate law, multi-billion naira cases. But when my daughter called me crying yesterday, telling me that some middle-level oil company executive with more ego than sense was trying to destroy her," Helen paused deliberately, "I decided to make an exception." "Objection!" Victor yelled, jumping to his feet. Panic was beginning to set in. Real panic. Personal attack. "Who does this woman think she is?" "Sit down, Mr. Okafor," Justice Okoro barked. But now the judge's tone had changed. There was respect in his voice when he turned to Helen. Everyone in the Nigerian legal community knew the name Helen Adekunle. She was a legend. She was called the Iron Queen. She had argued cases at the Supreme Court in Abuja and had never lost a constitutional challenge. She was not just a lawyer. She was a force of nature. "Mrs. Adekunle," Justice Okoro said, his tone now much more respectful, "while your reputation certainly precedes you, we are in the middle of a hearing regarding asset division. Barrister Nosu has filed a motion for immediate judgment based on the defendant's failure to secure representation." "Yes, I saw that motion," Helen said, pulling a thick folder from her briefcase. It was creative, poorly researched, but creative. She stood up and walked toward the bench, handing a massive stack of documents to Officer Chukwu to give to the judge. She dropped a duplicate stack onto Amici Nosu's desk with a heavy thud that made him jump. "Barrister Nosu claims my client has no assets and no legal standing. That is now irrelevant. Furthermore, Mr. Okafor claims that the properties in question, the house in Old GRA, the apartment in Lekki, and the investment portfolios with several banks, are his sole property, protected by a prenuptial agreement signed 6 years ago. That prenup is binding," Victor shouted. "She gets nothing. She signed it willingly." Helen turned to Victor. She removed her glasses slowly. "Mr. Okafor, do you know who drafted the legal framework for identifying coercion in prenuptial agreements that was adopted by the Nigerian Law Reform Commission?" Victor blinked. "What?" "I did," Helen said softly. "In 2003, I wrote the guidelines that define exactly what constitutes coercion in marital contracts." She tapped the documents on Amici's table. "And according to the sworn affidavit my daughter gave me yesterday evening, complete with her phone records, you threatened to send men to burn down her grandmother's house and harm her younger sister if she didn't sign that prenuptial agreement the night before your wedding." The courtroom gasped. Actual gasps from the people in the public gallery. "That's a lie," Victor screamed. His face was turning purple. "She's lying. She's a desperate liar." "We have the text messages from that night," Helen continued calmly, her voice cutting through Victor's shouting like a machete through grass. "Recovered from the backup server of your phone that you thought you had wiped clean. Exhibit C, my lord." Justice Okoro flipped through the documents to Exhibit C. His eyebrows shot up. His lips pressed into a thin line. Amici Nosu was frantically flipping through the pages, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. His hands were actually shaking. "My lord," Amici stammered. We haven't had adequate time to review this evidence. This is an ambush. This violates procedure." "An ambush?" Helen laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that makes your blood run cold. "Barrister Nosu, you try to rush through a judgment against a woman with no legal counsel while your client sat there and mocked her to her face. You don't get to talk to me about procedural fairness. Now, let's discuss the real issue here. The money," Helen said, turning to face the courtroom, addressing everyone like she was giving a lecture at law school. "Mr. Okafor claims his net worth is approximately 35 million naira, a decent amount for a man of his limited achievements." Victor looked like he was about to explode. However, Helen said, pulling out a second, even thicker folder, my team of forensic accountants, specialists who normally trace money for the FCC, spent the last 18 hours following the paper trail of shell companies Mr. Okafor has been using. Companies registered in Dubai, South Africa, and the Cayman Islands. She dropped the second folder on the table. The sound echoed through the silent courtroom. It appears, my lord, that Mr. Okafor has been siphoning marital assets into a company called Summit Holdings for the past 4 years. The total amount hidden is not 35 million naira. Helen leaned forward, her face now inches from Victor's. It's 98 million naira. And since Mr. Okafor failed to disclose any of these funds on his financial affidavit filed under oath just 3 days ago, that constitutes perjury and financial fraud. Victor slumped back in his chair. He looked at Amici, his voice a desperate whisper. Do something. Object. Say something, Amici. Amici Nosu looked at the documents spread in front of him. He looked at Justice Okoro, who was now glaring at Victor with undisguised disgust. Then he looked at Helen Adekunle, who was calmly checking her manicured nails like she was waiting for a bus. I need a recess, my lord, Amici said weakly. Request denied. Justice Okoro said immediately. The judge's voice was hard as iron. I want to hear more about these foreign accounts. Mrs. Adekunle, please continue. Helen smoothed her suit jacket. Thank you, my lord. But before we delve deeper into Mr. Okafor's fraud, I would like to address something else. I want to address the way my client was humiliated in this courtroom. She walked back to Joy and placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. For the first time, Joy looked up at her mother and smiled. A real smile. Hope spreading across her face like sunrise. Victor, Helen said, her voice now dropping to a conversational tone that somehow sounded even more dangerous. You mocked my daughter because you thought she was weak. You thought that because she is kind and gentle, she must be defenseless. You confused her mercy with cowardice. Helen turned to face the court reporter. Let the record show, she stated clearly, that Mrs. Joy Okafor is now represented by Helen Adekunle of Adekunle, Williams and Partners. And I am not here to negotiate, Barrister Nosu. She looked directly at Victor, her eyes burning with cold fire. I am here to take everything, the houses, the cars, every hidden naira, his reputation, his dignity. I'm going to dismantle your life piece by piece until you are left with exactly what you try to leave my daughter with. Nothing but shame. Barrister Nosu, Helen said, gesturing toward the witness area. Your client may take the stand now. I have questions for him. The atmosphere in the courtroom had completely changed. The air crackled with tension. The handful of people in the public gallery were now sitting forward, paying full attention. They could sense history being made. Justice Okoro rubbed his temples. He looked like a man who suddenly realized his routine divorce case had just turned into something much bigger. Barrister Nosu, Justice Okoro said, Does your client wish to testify? Victor looked at Amici desperately. Do I have to answer her questions? You're the plaintiff. Amici hissed back, his voice harsh. He was no longer trying to be supportive. He was trying to save himself. You filed this suit. You have to take the stand. And for God's sake, Victor, do not lie. That woman knows everything. She has documented everything. Victor stood up slowly. His legs felt weak. His expensive suit suddenly felt heavy, uncomfortable. He walked to the witness stand, and Officer Chukwu made him place his hand on the Bible and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Victor sat down. He looked out at the courtroom, trying to regain some of his earlier confidence. He was Victor Okafor. He was a senior manager at a major oil servicing company. He had graduated from the University of Lagos. He had built businesses. This old woman was just trying to intimidate him. Helen walked to the front of the courtroom. She didn't bring any notes. She just stood there, hands resting lightly on the wooden railing, and looked at Victor like a scientist examining an insect under a microscope. Mr. Okafor, she began, her voice deceptively pleasant. Let's start with something simple. Earlier today, you mentioned that my daughter was late because of traffic. Is that correct? Victor scoffed nervously. It was just a comment. She's always late. She's disorganized. She can't manage time. Disorganized? Helen repeated slowly. Is that why you took control of all the finances in your marriage? Because Joy was too disorganized to handle money. Yes, Victor said, gaining a bit of confidence. Joy is a dreamer. She does her little fabric business. She goes to church. She doesn't understand things like investments or portfolio management. I handled everything to protect our future. To protect your future? Helen nodded. I see. Is that why you purchased an apartment in Lekki Phase 1 on March 20th of this year? The one registered under Summit Holdings? Victor's confidence faltered. That was an investment. A rental property. Interesting, Helen said. She pulled a single sheet of paper from her jacket pocket and unfolded it carefully. Because according to credit card statements linked to that property, statements that your secretary, poor Mary, forgot to delete from the company's server, you purchased furniture for the apartment. Specifically, a king-size bed, a dining set, and new kitchen appliances. Rather expensive furnishings for a rental property, wouldn't you say? Joy's hand flew to her mouth. She gasped softly. Victor went pale. It was to increase the rental value. Good furniture attracts better tenants. Of course, Helen said. She was smiling again, but it was a predator's smile. And the gold necklace you purchased from that jewelry store in 3 days after buying the furniture, the one that cost 450,000 naira, was that also to attract tenants? Or was that for the woman living in the apartment? Objection, my lord. Amici jumped to his feet, though he looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Relevance. Issues of infidelity do not affect asset division under Nigerian law. They do when marital funds were used to support the affair, Justice Okoro ruled, his eyes now cold steel focused on Victor. Objection overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Okafor. Victor gripped the railing of the witness box. His palms were sweating. I don't know what she's talking about. Helen's smile widened. You don't? Very well. Let's leave your girlfriend Blessing aside for now. We'll come back to her later. Victor flinched when she said the name. Actually flinched like she had slapped him. After Helen systematically destroyed Victor's testimony, revealing his cryptocurrency holdings, his hidden bank accounts, and his systematic theft of marital assets, she called her next witness. I call Miss Blessing Okonkwo, Helen announced. Victor's head snapped up. His face went white. No, he whispered. She wouldn't do this to me. The courtroom doors opened again. A young woman walked in. She was beautiful, wearing a simple navy dress and flat shoes. She looked scared. Her hands were shaking. She walked past Victor without looking at him. Blessing, baby, please don't. Victor reached out a hand. She jerked away from him like he was a snake. Blessing took the witness stand. Officer Chukwu swore her in. Miss Okonkwo, Helen said gently. There was real kindness in her voice now. Thank you for having the courage to come here today. I know this is very difficult. Can you please tell the court what your relationship to Mr. Okafor was? Blessing took a deep breath. I was his girlfriend for 2 years. Was? Helen asked. Yes, Ma. I broke up with him yesterday evening. Why did you break up with him, Miss Okonkwo? Blessing looked directly at Victor. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also with fury. Because, she said, her voice shaking, because Mrs. Adekunle showed me the phone records, the messages Victor sent to another woman in Abuja. Another girlfriend. The courtroom erupted. People in the public gallery were whispering loudly. Order! Justice Okoro banged his gavel hard. I will have silence. Victor looked like he was going to vomit. His face had gone from white to green. Miss Okonkwo, Helen continued, completely unfazed by the noise. Did Mr. Okafor ever discuss his wife with you? All the time, Blessing said. The words came faster now, like water breaking through a dam. He told me his wife was useless. He said she was a burden who didn't understand anything about business. He said he was going to destroy her in court. He was proud of it, Ma. He bragged about it to his friends. Blessing's voice was rising now, the anger fully flowing. He said he was going to leave her with nothing. Not because he needed to, Ma, but because he wanted to. He said it would be fun. He called it teaching her a lesson. He wanted to make her suffer, so she would come back to him begging. Joy covered her face with her hands. Her whole body was shaking with sobs. Helen put an arm around her daughter's shoulders. He told me. Blessing continued, tears now running down her own face, that he had hired a lawyer who was a killer. That's what he called Barrister No-Sue. A killer. He said his wife was too stupid and too poor to fight back. He said he was going to make sure she ended up in a one-room apartment in Iliozu with nothing. Her voice cracked. He said he wanted to own her like a slave. The words hung in the air like poison gas. They were ugly, cruel, and they were the final nail in Victor Okafor's coffin. Helen let the silence stretch, let the weight of Blessing's testimony settle on everyone in the room. Justice Okoro removed his glasses. He cleaned them slowly with a white cloth from his pocket. He didn't look at the documents in front of him. He looked at Victor Okafor. Mr. Okafor, Justice Okoro began, his voice low and dangerous. In 23 years on the bench, I have seen many ugly divorces. I have seen people fight over cooking pots. I have seen people try to take children away out of spite. But I must tell you, what I have witnessed here today is among the most disgusting displays of arrogance, cruelty, and deception I have ever seen. Victor didn't look up. You came into my court, Justice Okoro continued, his voice rising like thunder, and you mocked the judicial process. You mocked a woman you promised to love and protect. You committed perjury. You committed fraud. You had millions of naira. You used marital funds to support not one, but multiple affairs. And you sat there laughing at your wife, thinking you had one. The judge turned to Joy. His face softened slightly. Mrs. Okafor, I owe you an apology. This court should have protected you sooner. I should have seen what was happening. Joy nodded through her tears. Helen squeezed her daughter's shoulder. However, Justice Okoro said, putting his glasses back on with deliberate slowness, I am now in a position to make things right. He picked up his pen. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the ceiling fans again. I'm issuing a temporary order immediately. The final judgment will follow once Mrs. Adekunle's forensic accountants complete a full audit of all of Mr. Okafor's assets, both in Nigeria and abroad. Every single naira. First, the judge said, his voice now formal and precise, I am freezing all bank accounts, investments, and assets belonging to Victor Okafor, Summit Holdings, or any other entity he controls or has interest in. Sole access is granted to Mrs. Joy Okafor and her legal counsel. Victor groaned out loud. Second, I am awarding Mrs. Okafor immediate and exclusive right to occupy the marital home in Old GRA. Mr. Okafor, you have until 6 o'clock this evening to vacate the premises. You may take your personal clothing and toiletries. Nothing else. If you remove so much as a teaspoon or a picture frame, I will have you arrested for theft. Third, Justice Okoro said, now looking at Amici No-Sue, I am referring a complete transcript of today's proceedings to the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission for investigation into perjury, fraud, and money laundering. Barrister No-Sue, I strongly suggest you cooperate fully if you wish to continue practicing law in this state. Yes, my lord. Amici said immediately, his voice small. Fourth and finally, Justice Okoro said, looking at Helen, Mrs. Adekunle, regarding your legal fees. Helen smiled. Yes, my lord. Mr. Okafor will be personally responsible for 100% of Mrs. Okafor's legal fees and costs, given your firm's standard rates for senior partners. The judge paused. I imagine that will be quite substantial. Very substantial, my lord, Helen agreed, her smile widening. Court is adjourned, Justice Okoro declared. Bang! The gavel came down with a sharp crack that sounded like a door slamming shut on Victor's old life. 3 months later, the art exhibition at Terraculture Gallery in Lagos was packed with people. Waiters moved through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne and small chops. The walls were covered with beautiful, vibrant paintings, bold colors, strong lines, images of women rising, breaking chains, finding freedom. The exhibition was called Rebirth, and every single painting had a small red dot next to it. Sold. Joy stood in the center of the main gallery space, wearing a gorgeous Ankara dress in deep blue and gold that she had designed and sewn herself. She was holding a glass of Chapman, laughing and talking with art collectors and gallery owners. She looked confident, happy, free. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a large painting titled The Gavel. It showed a stylized courtroom scene with a woman in white standing like an avenging angel, light pouring from her hands, breaking apart dark chains that had been wrapped around a smaller figure. It was powerful, raw, honest. "It's extraordinary joy," one collector said, a wealthy Lagos businessman wearing an expensive agbada. "I don't care about the price. I'm buying it. My wife needs to see this every day." Joy smiled. "Thank you so much. That means everything to me." From the corner of the gallery, Helen Adekunle stood watching her daughter. She was sipping a glass of white wine, looking elegant in a cream-colored suit. She wasn't just a lawyer anymore. She was a constant presence in Joy's life. A mother, a friend, a protector. Helen's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her purse and looked at the screen. It was a news alert from Premium Times. The headline read, "Former oil executive Victor Okafor sentenced to 7 years for fraud and money laundering." Helen opened the article. There was a photo of Victor. He looked terrible. His hair had gone gray. He had lost weight. He looked 10 years older. The photo showed him being led into Kirikiri prison in handcuffs. The article detailed how his own lawyer, Amici Nosu, had cooperated with the EFCC to avoid prosecution himself. It described the 98 million naira Victor had hidden in offshore accounts. It mentioned the forged documents, the multiple affairs, the cryptocurrency seized by the government. Victor had lost everything: the money, the houses, his reputation, his freedom, his future. Helen smiled slightly, closed the article, and put her phone away. She walked over to Joy. "Every painting is sold," Helen observed. "The gallery owner told me they've never had an opening night this successful." "I can't believe it, Mama," Joy said, her eyes bright with tears of joy. "People actually want my work. They're willing to pay for it. I never dreamed." "You're talented, my dear," Helen said firmly. "You always were. You just needed the freedom to show it." The gallery door opened and Daniel, the junior associate from Helen's firm, walked in. He looked excited. "Mrs. Adekunle, Joy," he called out, making his way through the crowd. "Sorry to interrupt this celebration, but there's news you need to hear." He was carrying a tablet. The final settlement check just cleared. The sale of Victor's properties, the return of the hidden funds, plus the damages the court awarded for emotional distress and financial abuse. He handed the tablet to Joy. On the screen was a bank statement. The number made Joy's breath catch in her throat. It was more money than she had ever imagined. Joy looked at the number. Then she looked at her mother. "It's really over," Joy whispered. "He can't hurt me anymore." "No," Helen corrected gently, putting her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "It's not over, my dear. Over implies an ending. What you have now is a beginning. This is your new life, your real life, the life you should have had all along." Outside the gallery, the lights of Lagos sparkled against the night sky. Traffic hummed on Timiyu Savage Street. Life went on. Somewhere in a prison cell in Kirikiri, Victor Okafor lay on a hard mattress, staring at a concrete ceiling, realizing that the woman he had called useless and stupid had just become the architect of his total destruction. Joy turned back to her guests, her laughter ringing through the gallery like music. She was no longer the frightened woman in the gray dress. She was Joy Adekunle Okafor, artist, businesswoman, survivor, and daughter of the Iron Queen. And she had so much painting left to do, so much life left to live, so much joy left to experience. The end. Final call to action. Victor Okafor learned something in that courtroom that day. Silence is not weakness. Silence is just the pause before someone reloads. He thought he could steal everything from Joy just because his name was on the bank accounts. But he underestimated the unstoppable power of a mother's love combined with decades of legal experience and an iron will. Joy didn't just win her freedom that day. She won back her voice, her art, her dignity, her life. And Victor? Victor lost everything except for one thing: a prison cell and the rest of his life to think about his mistakes. If you enjoyed this story of justice, karma, and the ultimate takedown, please hit that like button right now. It really does help the channel grow. Subscribe to Folktale by Eli so you never miss another story like this one. We bring you real stories about real people, the kind that make you think twice about how you treat others. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Leave a comment right now and tell me, have you ever had someone underestimate you, only to be shocked when you showed them what you're really capable of? I want to hear your stories. Where are you watching from? What did you think of Joy's mother showing up like that? Let me know in the comments. And remember this lesson, my friends, be very, very careful who you mock. Be careful who you underestimate. Be careful who you try to destroy. Because you never know who is about to walk through that courtroom door. You never know whose daughter you just made cry. And you certainly never know when the Iron Queen herself is about to enter your life and take everything you thought was yours. Thanks for watching. This is Folktale by Eli. Subscribe, like, and remember, treat people with respect. You never know who their mother is.